Awesome. Ready when you are.
Oh, you guys are ready?
Yeah,
Cameras
yeah.
rolling and everything?
Yep. Everything is set.
Okay. So nice to meet you again.
Yeah.
I like your hair. It looks really cool.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so just to start us off, I think just tell us a bit about yourself, your personal, educational, and career background.
Yeah, sure. No, happy to
Mm-hmm.
jump in. And this is something I've actually been repeating like over the coming weeks, just because of all the conversation I've been having with investors, users, and also I sort of like have
Yeah.
a framework now, a script. But I mean, overall, let's like to start with like my personal education background. So I went through like AC, which is like it's like American system, but like the Christian American education system. I
Mm.
did that from basically like from the time I started school up until like O levels, which is like general. And then I went on to do AS levels I did Cambridge, so GCSEs first, and then
Mm-hmm.
AS. And I transitioned back into then AC to complete now my intermediate level. And that's sort of like where I ended things now at AS level. So I didn't go on to proceed to A levels. Then I started uni. So I did uni in this university called Arden University. It's in Coventry. And that's on like
That's in the UK.
yeah, that's in the UK. Yep.
Yeah.
I did that for 2 years. I've put it on hold just because of everything that's going on in my life on the
Mm-hmm.
like I'd say with Honeycoin and like just everything I'm doing on that side as well. So putting it on hold was essentially like in the best interest of just being able to focus, but then definitely like with a goal to like resume that once things free up. Um,
Yeah.
and in terms of like, I guess to give an overview on myself, I would say I'm pretty multifaceted. So like a lot of people have different, I would say like versions of myself. Not that I'm bipolar or something,
Yeah.
but like in a way of like I find myself doing a lot of things, but the one that I'd focus on like right now and today is like software engineering, which is what
Yeah.
actually transitioned into then building Honeycoin. So like I've been coding since about 10, 11, and that's what sort of like framed all of the stuff that I was doing um, both in school. So I was working on like a bunch of apps and websites in school as well. And this now then framed me being able to work with a number of companies like in different countries and such, which
Yeah.
also led to like, working on Honeycomb as well. But I won't dig into this part because I feel like we'll then like, dig in
Yeah, we'll definitely
like
go
later
go into
on.
that a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that's just like, I guess, a short intro on myself. I feel like I've butchered it to some degree. I've gone like all over the place.
No, that's perfect. So
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, what are kind of the timelines here? Like when did you start uni and when did you pause?
Oh yeah. So in terms of timelines, I had already wrapped up my journal by around 2016. Started uni early 2019 and did that
Mm-hmm.
until so like 2020 is when I took a pause. So by 2021, I
Okay.
wasn't doing like uni at all. But I'd already
Okay.
started working on like I was already working like full time at like different companies between 2018 up until like the time I started working on Honeycomb, which is what I'm doing full time and such. So this was
Mm.
both pre-uni and during uni.
You know, I always knew you were a multifaceted person, but
Yeah.
I actually knew you was more of like David, the musician. There's also
Yeah.
that side of you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I think that's really interesting. And is that
I know.
something that you're still actively pursuing?
Yeah, and music is something I'm deeply passionate about. But I would say for now, it's really on the back burner, and for the most part, it is quite a hobby. I think for the like, what's weird is software engineering has sort of like been my main thing, but it's just the one thing that right now I'm sort of like talking about more, and that's sort of like now coming out as the primary thing right now, sort of like becoming my
Yeah.
overall brand and persona when it wasn't really
Mm-hmm.
the case. Like I was very much low touch with it because there was an so like 2010, 2011, even when I started up until 2013, 2014, there were very
Mm-hmm.
niche communities and such. So saying you're into software engineering or coding, just what someone hears is like IT buzzwords. So they just think like you're into
Yeah.
computers and such. So I mean, for the most part, it was
Yeah.
helpful to keep it niche. But like I would say that music is definitely something that is, for the most part, a hobby of mine that I'll continue pursuing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I play in church and all of that, and that's how like I stay adept and such. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's not something I'm looking to drop, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not the primary thing.
On your mind right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I really relate with what you're talking about, about how people would think of software engineering and group everyone who does something related to computers in the same category. I
Yeah.
have a friend who tried to explain she works in sales
Mhm.
with a top tech company, but
Yeah.
she works with software.
Okay.
And she tried to explain to her mom what she actually does, and her mom ended up telling her friends that she sells laptops. So
No, that's
yes,
hilarious.
yeah. So I understand. I understand like why you didn't want to be just grouped together with everybody else because you felt you couldn't stand out.
Exactly. It's a huge
Yeah,
problem. Yeah.
yeah. So let's kind of get into the pandemic and how that related with everything. So
Yeah.
maybe just start by telling me, can you recall when you first learned about the pandemic?
Mhm.
Just yeah.
I mean, it's very vivid in my mind because it's
Mm-hmm.
like at that time, this was around February, March, and
Mm-hmm.
when it started to set, like when it hit, it wasn't a pandemic. Let me just say that. Like it felt like,
Yeah.
something that was just passed, like, oh yeah, like something else that's on the news. This was around February, March, and I didn't think anything of it because at this time I was actually deeply thinking about then going to the UK to then continue studying from there. I was here like at this time when I'd really started my course and such. Now, when it hits, we're already getting like emails from the school and such. And I was thinking now, okay, this will probably change a lot of things because now they're saying like all foreign exchange students or distance learning students just stay in whatever country you're in.
Yeah.
And so that's when it started to hit like sort of like a big deal in my mind in just like also thinking about the future, what that would look like. But this never at any point in time sort of like hindered anything I was doing like on the software engineering front. And it's just
Mm-hmm.
basically because of how, in my opinion, like software engineering it's the kind of thing that you don't need a place or a certain like environment to do it. Like all you need
Mm-hmm.
really is your laptop, which is why I love it as well. Like it's very remote, it's very like easy to pick up and like carry along. But I vividly remember just thinking, yeah, this is
Mm-hmm.
just another disease that will pass and things will be okay. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think we're all still going through the trauma of just how long the pandemic has been, because I feel like it's still there
Yeah.
right now.
It really is. It very
Yeah,
much
but there are a
is.
lot of things on my mind at that time. Not
Mm-hmm.
worry per se. Like I think for the most part, it was even optimism. Because like at that time, I wasn't working on Honeycoin in any way. Like before that, I was actually at this fintech company called Flutterwave, and I was already
Mm-hmm.
working remotely. So
Yeah.
like it didn't change anything for me. In fact, I was more or less thinking, yeah, this is just more time I can use to code. And now you don't need to make excuses to go out, like people asking, oh, we should meet up. And now you just say it's a pandemic. You don't have to say you're busy or
Yeah.
anything like that. So like for me, I think
Everyone's using the same excuse.
exactly like, yeah, the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic became sort of like the overall excuse. But yeah, like I would say on my side, it was like mostly optimism, and I didn't take it as anything serious. But as things now
Mm-hmm.
progressed, it started to really become like a significant thing in my mind. And just
Yeah.
because of like the physical effects of and everything that was sort of like affecting as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you first heard about it, you said, okay, this is probably gonna change some things, but you didn't anticipate it to change how you were dealing with Honeycoin and everything. So I think before we kind of get into what actually transpired
Yeah.
when it actually came about, maybe tell us a bit about how the idea behind Honeycoin when you started it, and I guess what the motivation behind it was,
Yeah.
and what you do
Oh
and what
yeah,
Honeycoin
and what
is.
honeycomb is, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's really good context. Yeah, so maybe just to provide the framing around like why I started it, it was actually
Mm-hmm.
out of a deep frustration on a personal level first, and then like a series of conversations that I had with a bunch of different people on the pain point that we initially like were thinking about solving. Well, I was thinking about solving because at the time there was no we, it was just me like for quite a while. But
Mm-hmm.
the reason I started it was actually like, okay, so it's a kind of interesting story. So because I was like and have been working only for remote startups. So startups in the US, the UK, usually the way that I get paid or when I'm on payroll is through PayPal. Now,
Yeah.
around February, March, and this was like exactly when the pandemic like hit, my PayPal account was frozen, and I messaged PayPal like time and time again. I'm asking them, yo, why did you freeze my account? Like I just actually got like someone just routed funds into my account, and I wanted to withdraw, and they started giving like a number of excuses, like, oh, you opened the account and you're underage. And then I started asking, like, why would you allow me to open the account if I was underage? And, you know, all of these things. And the way it ended actually was just them saying that we're going to freeze your account indefinitely, including the funds. So this was a huge, like, I don't know, it was something that frustrated me really significantly. And I started to think about just how fragmented or difficult it is for people within Africa to exchange value, transfer value, or actually monetize globally. And how does monetization look like? It's very much P2P. It's very much like it's remittance based, but it's usually like a transactional relationship, not just someone who's sending you money for something. And so that was like the initial premiere. And when that's so like thing happened, I started to talk about like with a number of people who also like developers who I know, like friends of mine who also work remotely. I started to talk with like people in the creative passion economy space who are like freelancers, they're designers, artists, and all of them share the same frustration. Like you'd go on even forums and just see how everyone is saying like PayPal just froze my money. They haven't given context. Now they're saying, oh, like it'll have to be held for a long period of time. This in and of itself was like, I would say the main initial push to just build something within this space. It was like, if these guys are not going to solve my problem and they're just making my life harder, then I'm going to build a remittance wallet just for like to solve my problem. Because initially I was just thinking, let me just build this out. And then, you know, anytime I need to receive funds from anywhere in the world, I can use like my own sort of like an internal tool. But what transpired then was like I built this thing and then started to like also talk about it with like a bunch of like the folks that I know, so very much close circle. And so they started to try it out and like, you know, get paid from like the US or South Africa or Nigeria or so like these are now people essentially I knew that I was just reaching out to and saying, hey, listen, I built this thing and because of my frustration with PayPal, like, do you want to try it out? And so initially, yeah, well, like the goal was just let's build like a fintech remittance wallet. But as we started to go along, even though the traction was and is like still really significant, and I'll be happy to get into that like a bit later on, I realized as well that there's so many nuances to the platform itself that we can build around. So let's not just think remittance, like build a better PayPal or an Africa-centric PayPal. Let's actually build like an ecosystem of financial technology products that help people to build wealth, that help people to transfer value, that help people to essentially actually not only be able to, I would say, empower themselves. So like we give you the tools and feel free to do what you're doing within like a KYC and like regulated ecosystem within like the actual platform itself. And so, yeah, that was like the initial frustration. But just to touch on like, I don't know. Yeah, I think I'll stop there. Just talk about like the thing that started it, and maybe we can dig into now like how the product is, or just to actually quickly dive into the product itself. So Honeycoin as it is right now it's basically like a cross-border remittance wallet and monetization platform. So there's 4 different products that we have, 3 different products, but 4 native applications and then 1 web application. So we have like a remittance wallet, which is just like think Cash App, but Cash App that you can use in different countries. So you can essentially receive money if you're in Kenya, and let's say you're in Canada. So you can send me money. We don't support CAD, but we support USD. So you'd still be able to pay with like your CAD card, and then you'll pay in USD. And then we essentially what we've built is like it's basically like an aggregation layer that allows us to receive different currencies, and then we convert those currencies on behalf of the individual receiving them. And then we can pay you out into like your mobile money or your bank accounts. We support like right now, I think right now it's about over 200 banks across Africa and a few banks in the US. Any bank that leverages Swift, you can actually pay out into those particular bank accounts. And then now just like mobile money in Uganda, Ghana, Kenya, Tanzania, and Zambia, which also uses mobile money. So like that's one angle of the platform. But to talk about like the two other native platforms, that's like the crypto wallet. So it's very much like an investment product, but also still part of like our remittance offering, because you can actually buy tokens like Tether or USDC and send the USD value that we will help you convert into then a local currency like KES and GHS. But then now we built this layer, and yes, we're seeing like a lot of traction, and that's where the monetization aspect comes then in thinking about how can, yes, we've built something that helps people transfer money, but how can we build something on top of this that helps people make money? And so the monetization aspect of the platform is then now just basically, you can think about it like Gumroad or Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee, but for Africa, still like with global reach. So users can essentially create membership plan-based links. They can create payment links for a particular service that they're selling. They can create payment links for a product that they're selling, or they can actually just have one direct payment link. So every single account has one direct payment link, which is sort of like your virtual tip jar, if you can call it that. And I can just go on your payment link, send you money if I wanted to, or send you money because like I appreciate whatever you're doing. So think a YouTuber monetizing their page because they just don't want to earn from ads, but they also want to get like, you know, allow their audience to support them. So that's where like the creators sort of like fit into like the overall product. But yeah, that's like a holistic overview. I know it's a lot to digest, so I'd be happy to dig
It
in.
is a lot, and
Yeah.
I'm very impressed. I'm just curious, the remittance aspect
Yeah.
of it, how does it differ from other apps?
Yeah.
Because I think every country has I don't think besides PayPal there's any other that you can send to every other country.
Yeah.
But every country at least has its own type of couple of versions of the apps where you can send money directly to like mobile phones. So how is that different? Do you have a better exchange rate, or
yeah, so there's a number of things. Yeah, and that's a really good question, because that's really I would say, the crux of everything we're doing. Because if we don't have differentiation, then we're just another like app, but there's a number of ways that we're different and better than other platforms. So one being, PayPal doesn't actually support a lot of African countries. So out of like the African countries they claim to support, you can actually only withdraw in 5 of those countries. So Kenya being one, South Africa being one, Zambia being one, and Ghana being one as well. So that's a very significant limitation. Now, aside from that, there's a really good platform like that I have used in the past as well, like Wise. But the problem with Wise, which was formerly TransferWise, is they've optimized for diaspora to Africa remittances, but not the other way. So we've actually optimized for both sides, which provides for further differentiation. So you can't only, so you can send from the US to Kenya, and you can also do it like the other way. So Kenya to the US, which is something that was like really lacking. This is also due to how like FX currencies are regulated and how they're also like these like central banks operate these FX currencies. What usually happens is weaker currencies like KES, GHS, and NGN to the dollar or the pound usually have worse spreads. But we've actually built a model that allows us to innovate on these spreads. So we can still provide like a mid-market rate, which is a very accurate rate to the actual exchange rate, while still also being able to like transfer the funds as quickly as we do. So all transfers are instant. Withdrawals usually take like about a day or 2 days. But like the third, which is like the biggest differentiator, is just the crypto aspect of the platform. So like crypto is such a buzzword right now, but the way that we are building it out is to, I think while it is hot right now, it's still very complex, but we've built out a platform that's abstracted all the complexity and helps you. It feels like M-Pesa, like there you'd use M-Pesa, there you load your M-Pesa, there you send money locally. That's exactly the way our crypto remittance wallet works. And that's why like, I feel like for the most part, it has even given us like a bigger moat compared to like other platforms like your PayPal's, Cash Apps and such.
Wow, I think we can kind of go into everything and go on forever. But I think I noticed that, and I think you've also mentioned that you're kind of targeting the arts, and that's kind of what I saw on your website. So I was just curious, is this kind of inspired by your musical side,
Yeah,
or is it that you feel that the most people who need to really monetize are artists?
yeah. So I wouldn't say art. I would say like our main angle is social commerce, and the
Okay.
reason for that, like to dig into that, is the way when we analyzed a lot of the transactions that were happening, we realized that it was actually an exchange of value happening, but not on centralized platforms like your Jumias and Amazons, very much like social transactional behavior. So, and when I say that, what I mean is essentially like it's an individual on Instagram who's selling whatever they're selling. Like if they are page and they're thrifting clothes, or if they're a page that just sells shoes, or if you're an individual and you're a content creator and you have like all of these upsells that you give to your audience, like you have closed content that you want them to access, it's very like we noticed a lot of friction within these particular transactions. But it's not just that, it's also like two individuals who, let's say you have like a friend or a family in a particular different country. A lot of these
Yeah.
transactions were social in the nuance of what was happening behind those transactions. So one of the most significant contributors to like our overall transaction volume every month is students receiving like funds for upkeep or like for fees.
Yeah.
And this is
Yeah.
like a very much, it is yes, it's a transaction, but we need to think deeper and go past that particular transaction to what's happening behind it, which is like a really significant like contributor to, overall, I'd say when we're able to extract that insight, then we know how to even frame it better in terms of building for that particular problem and such. But I mean, just to also touch on like holistically, the social commerce aspect also touches on just, passion and creative economy individuals. So like, can you hear me?
You cut off for a second, so I
I'm so
think
sorry.
whatever you were
What was the
talking
last
about,
thing? What is the last thing you heard?
I just zoned out for a second because I was trying to figure out what's going on.
No, okay. Let me track back to the question and I'll answer it briefly so we can move along.
Yeah.
And you asked like, is the target artists? And so I
Yeah.
was then segueing into like, the target is not actually artists, it's like social commerce, anything that's happening within the social commerce space. So think passion and creative economy individuals. So your designer or developer getting paid, your musician or artist selling their work directly to their fans, your content creator building an audience and monetizing them, your Instagram page that's selling merch or selling clothes or selling basically any particular product. The goal
Yeah.
is to provide the financial infrastructure for them to still have these transactions happening directly with whoever they're interacting with. And if you think about it as well, like, would you trust more a platform like Jumia or Amazon, or the Instagram page that you've been following for 6 months? Of course, it's someone that you've seen and you can see
Yeah.
that they're trustworthy and such. And
Yeah.
one other really significant contributor to like our transaction volume was like students receiving funds from their parents for like fees and such. And why this was like really interesting in my opinion is because when we actually dig deeper into why these transactions are happening, then we're able to actually optimize for these particular transactions and build a platform around that. And I feel like that's basically the most exciting thing, because we're actually then solving the pain points, not just saying that, yeah, monetization needs to happen, but like, why does it need to happen? And what are like the best use cases that we can optimize and solve for as well?
Okay. It's very, very interesting. So kind of to go back a little bit,
Yeah.
before you had said that when the pandemic hit and now you've saw it as an opportunity for you to do more coding, you said
Yeah.
it was just you. So at what point did this team now grow until you're saying, okay, now we were bringing our ideas together?
Well, it's quite interesting. So the team has only grown now, and only because right now we are sort of like coming out of like our internal beta. So for the most part, between last year and right now, it's been actually invite only. So only registered users are able to onboard new users by sending in their invite code. Very much like how Clubhouse did it like early on, if you know Clubhouse, and the
Yeah.
sort of like the invite-based system. And this was sort of like, we can manage our growth whilst improving the platform over time. So right now we've come to a place where the platform is solid, and we're also venture backed, which essentially means that we've gotten like we have a number of investors on board who actually then chosen to invest in a platform. So like
Yeah.
we now have not only the platform as it is and the potential for it, but we have the resources in terms of capital. And so this is now what made me think deeply about, I can't like do this alone anymore, or even
Yeah.
for like any longer, just because of like the different nuances around the roles that we need to fill for. So right now, I'll say there are two. There's one full-time employee that's working right now who is stealth, like we'll be announcing them soon. And then two contractual people. One's a product designer, and then one's like our sort of like head of PR and like communication. So influencer partnerships, so any PR that we're doing around like interviews and such. And the way that I think about these particular roles is, for the most part, the product we've built up until this point is very solid. So right now we need to just tell a better story and tell that story loudly to get like
Yeah.
more and more people on board. But in terms of the build as well, it was basically me like for a long time, just me in my room coding and validating. But I think it was so important to do that because even though I think about hiring, when you hire people, you need to de-risk that hire as much as possible. And the only way to de-risk it is by validating it on your own. So the only thing I would have lost, yes, is money, but also time, which is the most precious thing. But just losing my time is better than wasting someone else's time on something that I don't necessarily have thought deeply about and such. But yeah, so right now the team is growing, and we're probably gonna be hiring like 4 more roles within the next 3 to 6 months, but definitely not up to a 50% team. The goal is to keep it like really lean.
So for you, you would say that, I guess, the greatest opportunity the pandemic gave you was the time to kind of really work on this.
The time and just I would say the biggest and the best resource was the time, because with that time came a lot of space to think and to analyze, to observe. With the hustle and bustle of everything going on when we were pre-pandemic, there was literally no time to actually just say, okay, what can I do that would actually serve for the most impact outside of financial upside, outside of clout, if clout is a motivator. And outside of those things, the one thing that just kept ringing in my mind is we have very few platforms that are optimizing for like this particular market. And I'm generalizing by saying Africa as a market, but it is actually Africa, because think about the number of platforms that are locally built and serving like this particular market, providing value for individuals within this market. So that was like the pandemic itself just provided now that time to think deeply about these kinds of things. And that's what just framed everything that I did within the pandemic, everything I'm doing right now. And that was literally the greatest gift that came out of it.
And so now post-pandemic, you have all this time. So what were some of the, I guess, biggest surprises? They could be good or bad throughout this process as you're working deep into your craft and expanding.
As we scale, I would say the biggest surprises was I didn't realize how big the continent itself is. Like when we talked about like Pan-African scaling, when we talked about like just continent-wide scaling, I didn't realize just how many people and the sheer value of just a few people within these particular countries. And another surprising thing was just nuances in these different countries. So I've been to very few African countries. Of course, like I'll be ramping up traveling to these countries as we build out the platform, to be a bit more nuanced in these particular countries. But I didn't realize how culturally different most people are as well, in the way they even think about like an app or a platform. Like I realized, and this is something interesting. This is literally just from building Honeycoin and the pandemic as well. I've started to see that West Africans are more not trustworthy, but they're easier inclined to trust a platform or a stranger than East Africans. Like East Africans are very skeptical, and this is something that was shocking to me because I felt like it was the other way around. But this is only something that I've realized by building Honeycoin, by going on this journey. Another surprising thing is I realized I am not as good at managing my time as I thought I was. Like I'm not even a procrastinator, but I'm just very much like I can say whilst usually I try to be productive, like for, I guess most of the time. Sometimes what I realized is you can be doing something, but you can also not be productive whilst doing that thing, because it can be probably the wrong use of your time at that particular time, and whatever you needed to be doing, that was not that thing that you're doing. I know that's a bit of like, no, I
No,
know
that
that's kind of
actually,
confusing, but it
that is
makes sense,
such
yeah?
a, no, I think that is actually very wise. And it's really good to be self-aware in that sense. Because
Yeah,
you're saying that and I'm thinking about how I use my time. And sometimes
yeah,
like you don't want to procrastinate, so I need to get to work. But
yeah,
whatever you're doing, it might not be the best use of your time at that moment. So I
exactly, yeah.
honestly I completely understand what you're saying.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Like, yeah, so I just didn't know how to frame it the right way. But yeah, you explained it perfectly. That's the exact dilemma that I face on a day-to-day basis. I feel like I'm doing better now, but I don't know. I would say I'm not perfect yet, but definitely getting there.
I mean, you've made a lot of big strides, and
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
yeah. It's very, very impressive.
Mhm.
So those were some surprises, and what would you say was like a big challenge? Maybe it could be technical, it could be gathering the team. Was that a challenge, maybe?
So I think the challenge would be fundraising initially. So when we were like, the way I think of the platform, I was just putting in my own money, like financing everything myself. So financing the apps, the review process, financing the licenses that we need, the business registration, all of that was coming from my own pockets. Now, I realized that whilst I can still continue to do this for a long period of time, it wouldn't be the fastest way for us to scale. So that's when I started thinking about like, okay, yeah, maybe let's just go ahead and sell secondary shares to like investors who are keen on accredited investors or venture capitalist firms who can actually then be able to invest in like Honeycoin as the platform as it was. Now, when starting out, I'd say it was quite challenging just to get those first calls or like those first inbounds into like, hey, I'm building this thing and like I'd love investors on board, because it was very much like it felt like a side project, and I see how it felt like a side project because then you have like this one man band who's telling you that like we want to disrupt
Invest.
monetization and like
Yeah.
remittance in Africa, and it for the most part it was like